Well, hello friends. We have a really great passage to study today in the book of John. So let's dive in. We are going to be in John 9. This is the story of Jesus healing a blind man. So really excited about that. Let's start in prayer and then we will read this together. Lord, we slow down and we bow ourselves before you, God, and we ask that you would illuminate your word to us, that you would show up in this time and just teach us new things about who you are, about how you work, about the life of Christ, and may it change us. May we walk away transformed. We pray this in Christ's name, amen. All right, so we're in John 9, so if you'll grab your Bible and turn there, we're gonna work through this story. And we really are gonna look at quite a few things. So here's kind of where we're going. There's 4 things that I wanna just pull out and just soak out of this passage. 1, first of all, Jesus destroys karma. Jesus destroys karma. 2, Jesus leaves evidence. 3, Jesus sheds light and shines his light. And 4, Jesus sees. So we're gonna look at these 4 things and pull these out of the passage together. But this is just a really great story. So I also want you to just like work your imagination over in this story. Imagine what it might have been like to be any of the different characters. Imagine what it would have been like to be the man who's healed. Imagine what it would have been like to be Christ, who's doing the healing, who's bringing hope and life. Imagine, I mean, you aren't Christ, but you know what I mean. Imagine what it would have been like to be the Pharisees experiencing this. It's hard to put ourselves in the shoes of the enemy, right? But it's in all of us. Imagine what it would have been like to be this guy's parents. They show up on the scene. The disciples who are confused, right? So we're gonna read this and I just want you to think about, use your imagination. Here we go. As he passed by Jesus, he saw a man blind from birth. That's really important. This idea of him being blind from birth is gonna come up again. And that just means he didn't have an accident. It's not like he was temporarily blinded. The point is he's been blind. It's been like a deal for his whole life, and seemingly more difficult to heal. And his disciples asked him an interesting philosophical question. Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Which is really interesting. I don't know that they meant to employ karma. There were probably a lot of different Jewish beliefs, like the idea of your sin being passed down from generation to generation, and the consequences of that. But have you noticed how in our day and age, this idea of karma gets thrown around a lot? Like this idea that whatever you do, whatever you put out into the universe, it's gonna come right back on your head. Like if someone, gets, hit by a car, people just assume, oh, well, they had bad karma. They must have done something and put something out into the universe that would cause them to deserve that. And so it's a similar philosophy of like, whose karma is this guy dealing with? Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Whose karma is messed up that he would be born blind? So I guess what they would be thinking too is if he'd become blind from like an accident or something, that was his karma. But if he was born blind, is it a punishment of the parents? Is it a punishment to the guy who never did anything wrong when he was born, right? So it's a really interesting philosophical question. And Jesus answered, it's not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. Fascinating. So he basically is saying, it wasn't his parents' karma, it wasn't their sin, it wasn't this guy's sin. It was for a totally different purpose, that the works of God might be put on and display. And obviously, we can look at all of our hardships and all the things going on in our lives and think like, well, is Jesus gonna come heal them? Is he gonna make every blind person see? Is that the whole goal? And I don't think that that's the intention, that everyone who comes to Christ is automatically going to regain their sight or be able to walk in this life. Obviously in heaven those things all get healed, but that the works of God might be displayed in him, I do think that can be applied to everybody. So it's interesting that Christ says it like, hey, God is going to be glorified in crazy ways, by the hardships that we go through. And that's a great comfort. So he says in verse 4, we must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Having said these things, he spit on the ground and made mud with the saliva. Then he anointed the man's eyes with the mud and said to him, go wash in the pool of Siloam, which means sent. So he went and washed and came back seeing. This is the part where like we really have to slow down to imagine what that must have been like, because most of us are not blind. And the closest thing that I have come to being able to even come close to understanding it is watching those videos of people who get like the glasses that they can put on who have been colorblind, right? And then they put the glasses on and they just like start sobbing because they had no idea of the brilliance of the colors that were all around them, right? It's like it opens up a whole new world for them. Or the people who get like cochlear implants who've been deaf and they can begin to hear again. They can hear their mother's voice. They can hear their child's voice for the first time. And it just like moves them to tears because of a whole world that it unlocks for them, right? And so here's this guy who's never known sight, never been able to see, doesn't have a concept for it. He knows that other people can do it, but he's never been able to try it. So here, suddenly he can see. So you can just imagine that moment. And so the neighbors and those who'd seen him before as a beggar, because what's he gonna do, were saying, is this not the man who used to sit and beg? And some said, it is he. Others said, no, but he is like him. He's just a lookalike, right? He kept saying, I am the man. So he was defending himself. So they said to him, and how were your eyes opened? He answered, the man called Jesus made mud and anointed my eyes and said to me, go to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed and received my sight. They said to him, where is he? He's like, I don't know. Just crazy. So they brought the guy to the Pharisees. They brought the man who'd formerly been blind. Verse 14. Now it was a Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes, which was like the most frustrating thing for the Pharisees because they had so set apart the Sabbath that it became a self-righteous thing. So they literally did nothing on the Sabbath. And so here Jesus comes along and heals people on the Sabbath and is like, that's not what I meant, guys, when I set apart the Sabbath, right? And so they get really annoyed with him when he heals on the Sabbath. And so it was the Sabbath day when he healed him, right? Verse 15. So the Pharisees asked him, the blind guy, or the guy who was blind, again, how he had received his sight. And he said to them, he put mud on my eyes, and I washed, and I see. Some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath. So like, there's a disconnect between he healed on the Sabbath, but so he can't be from God. That's how entrenched that idea was to them. But others said, how can a man who's a sinner do such signs? They're like, yeah, but we don't know anybody else that can do that. So like, clearly the favor of God is on him. So they were having like there was division. It literally says, and there was division among them. They had arguments about this because it just blew their minds. It did not fit their categories. I love that about Jesus. So they said again to the blind man, what do you say about him since he's opened your eyes? And he said, he's a prophet. What else? So the Jews did not believe that he had been blind and received his sight. They were like, we're not buying this story. Until they called the parents of the man who'd received his sight and asked them, is this your son who you say was born blind? How then does he now see? So they wanted evidence. They wanted to know, like, is this made up? Is this one of these stories? Did he just have an accident and then it came back? Or was it a fluke? And so his parents, verse 20, answered, we know that this is our son and that he was born blind, but how he now sees we do not know, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him. He's of age. He's a grown-up. He will speak for himself. Parentheses, verse 22. His parents said these things because they feared the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that if anyone should confess Jesus to be Christ, he would be put out of the synagogue. So this is interesting. They had actually set up rules that you would be excommunicated from your faith if you claimed Jesus to be the Christ. That was a heresy and a blasphemy for them. And so they were scared and they didn't want to put themselves in that position to claim Christ. Therefore his parents said, he is of age, ask him. So for the second time, they called the man who'd been blind and said to him, Give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner. He answered, whether he's a sinner, this is the man who'd been born blind talking. This is great. He goes, whether he's a sinner, I don't know. One thing I do know, that though I was blind, now I see. Man, I love that. Where are we? Verse 26. They said to him, what did he say to you? How did he open your eyes? He answered them, I've told you already, and you wouldn't listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become one of his disciples? So he was like joking with them. And they reviled him again, saying, you are his disciples, but we are disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but as for this man, we don't know where he comes from. The man answered, why, this is an amazing thing. You don't know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, God listens to him. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. They answered him, you were born in utter sin, and would you teach us? And they cast him out. Man. So what this tells us about Jesus is that he leaves evidence. Jesus isn't there. He's doing his own thing. We don't know where he is, but he left evidence. And the evidence is the guy who says, I don't know what happened or how it happened. All I know is I was blind, now I can see. I was blind, now I can see. Argue with them facts, right? So Jesus is leaving no argument here. There was a person who was blind, and now that person can see. So Jesus just walks through his time on earth with a wake of evidence. Just person after person who was like, I was lame, but now I can walk. I was, dead, but now I'm alive, Lazarus. I was sick, and now I'm well, over and over and over again. He's got this wake of evidence that these Pharisees just cannot deal with. And so what do? They go directly to this guy's character and discredit him. They're like, you were born a sinner. We knew it all along. Your testimony is worthless to us, right? And so if you can't explain something, what do? You discredit the source, right? And so they just dismissed him. And then I love what happens next. This is my favorite part. It says in verse 35, Jesus heard that they cast him out, and having found him, he said, do you believe in the Son of Man? He answered, and who is he, sir, that I may believe in him? So he thinks he's talking to a prophet. And Jesus said to him, you've seen him, and it is he who is speaking to you. He said, Lord, I believe, and he worshiped him. Jesus said, this is interesting, for judgment I came into this world, that those who do not see may see, and those who see may become blind. Some of the Pharisees near him heard these things and said to him, are we also blind? And Jesus said to them, if you were blind, you would have no guilt. But now that you say, we see, your guilt remains. Your guilt remains. So to talk about this section, I want to go back because in verse 5, he says, as long as I'm in the world, I am the light of the world. So Jesus is the light. And what I love about the fact that he calls himself the light is one of those things, a lot like fire, water, air, that like when used well and used correctly, it's wonderful. Like light brings illumination. We can see things as a result of it. But light that's shining right in your face, too much light staring at the sun will blind you. And so light is one of these things that like for some is really good, and in some situations is really good, and other situations is really uncomfortable. When you're trying to sleep, when you're trying to go to sleep and someone's shining a flashlight in your face, really uncomfortable, right? If you are robbing a bank and someone turns the lights on, that's not going according to plan, right? And so light's one of these things that to some people it's going to be good, and in other situations it's less favorable. That's the same with fire, right? Fire in a fire pit is amazing. You roast marshmallows, it keeps things warm. Fire in a fireplace heats the house. Fire outside of that can be really painful and destructive, right? Same with air. To human beings, air is necessary for life, oxygen. To a fish, it's toxic, right? And so Jesus is saying, I am going to be a controversial figure. I just am. I came for judgment so that people who are blind would get sight. For some people, Jesus is their the freedom. It is life to their veins. It's like water in a desert, right? Jesus is light in a dark place. When you're lost and you don't know where you're going, he's the one who brings the light. But for others, those who are operating in the darkness, when you flip the switches on, right, it's blinding. And so Jesus is saying, I'm going to be controversial. I'm a double-edged sword. I'm a two-sided coin. Some people are going to really like me and some people are not. And that's what is telling, right? That's how you can tell the difference is like a magnet, right? Magnets are going to stick to some and repel others, right? And it's important to know that about Jesus. Like we love Jesus. We should not be surprised if Jesus is polarizing. Having Jesus like in your life and making him Lord of your life is going to result just naturally in some people being more drawn to you and some people being repelled by you just by that one fact. Now, there are things that we can do as Christians that can further repel people, because when we become Pharisees, right, we become super hypocritical, and that's not the right way. We're repelling the wrong people, right? When we become hypocritical, right? But if we're walking with Christ and walking in his Spirit, that is going to be really off-putting to some people. And man, for other people, that's going to be life to their souls. You are going to be a breath of life to them. So just remember that and know that like that's how Jesus was, and that's what you can expect in this world too. But underneath all of that, what I hope we take away really comes out of verse 35. And it says, Jesus heard they had cast him out, and having found him, he said. So Jesus heard that they kicked this guy out. I mean, that had to be humiliating, right? They completely discredit him. And Jesus goes and finds him and strikes up a conversation. And not just any conversation. In this conversation, he reveals himself to this man. He like pulls back the veil and shows himself. It's like when Batman lifts the mask, right? And reveals his identity, or Spider-Man, right? And Jesus is like pulling back the mask and revealing his identity to this guy. So he goes and finds him, this guy who's just a reject of society. And that's who he chooses to reveal himself to, right? And that's just so telling of Christ, that he's the one who sees. In other parts of scripture, God is described as a God who sees. Nothing escapes his notice. No stone goes unturned. Like every person who's been outcast has been seen by God and loved. And that includes you. Like God sees you. When you are cast out, he finds you. When you have been rejected by your peers or by society, like you're the one he wants to reveal himself to. He wants to draw near to you. He wants to be close to you. He wants to demonstrate himself to you in his glory in your life. And so I hope that's a great encouragement to you. And what ends up happening is he tells him like, hey, I'm the Son of Man. And this guy responds with worship. He responds with worship. Y'all, when we see Christ more clearly, when we really have been found by him, when we really are known by him, our response is worship. So we worship as a response to that. And so I would say, whichever person you identify most with in this story, or wherever you're at in your life, like take comfort in the knowledge that our Christ, he destroys karma. You don't have to worry that all of your sin is just going to come heaping back on you. Like God wants to display his glory in the brokenness of your life. There is hope for all of that, namely found in the cross. He has left evidence. We are not without evidence. There is a wake of evidence of Christ's handiwork and the handiwork of God all over the universe. both in his creation and in the stories of what he's done in people's lives. And so I encourage you to familiarize yourself with the story of God's transforming work in people's lives. And then Jesus shines light. He's either going to shine light and bring hope for some, or shine light and expose others. And one is really beautiful, the other is really uncomfortable. And that's going to be true if you are shining the light of Christ. That's also going to be true of you. So you can expect that. And then Jesus sees, he sees you. He sees you, he knows you, he finds you. And he loves you. I don't know what happened. My phone did a Siri thing. Anyway, speaking of love, you are loved. We love you. We're so proud of you. We miss you. And hope to see you soon.